webinar if it's just the two of you, but we're joined by Marusia, and Phoebe will be along, and of course we've got Flavia here because she'll be presenting and it's her program, and so welcome. Welcome everybody. Do you notice anything? There was no comments on Monday on the morning session, but do you notice anything? On the front slide, anything? Anything different? Mohammed, you're typing. It's a silly question and not really relevant, relevant to social protection whatsoever. But impact, speak louder and clearer. How's that? Is that easier? Is that clearer? My question was, my start was a warm welcome to you all on how to financially sustain social protection programs, especially in the rural areas. And my question was, do you notice anything different? It's just to see how people's noticing skills, how awake people are. Anything different? Mohammed. Hello. What do you notice? Anything different?
No, I think financing social protection plans in rural areas, I think the first thing that comes to mind is AIDS, national or international AIDS. But AIDS are usually are not sustained. They can be, some years they can be available and others they cannot be available. I think for sustaining, we can move toward some plans that gradually relies on the empowerment and some other sorts of protection, such as public work. Semi-sustained. You can start with semi-sustained plans, then move toward fully sustained plans, and eventually we can reach on protection plans that are not independent on exterior financials, such as insurance. I think insurance is a type of social protection plans, but it can be applied in long-term periods, after long-term periods. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And so you've just already, Zara, hello, welcome.
I noticed something, but I don't know if it is relevant or irrelevant. Can I say it?
Yes.
Well, I noticed that you are wearing today something very elegant. The motif is similar to what's behind you.
I know. I'm pleased you noticed. I love it. So true. That was one. And the second one, I don't know if you noticed, but we have new branding. So it's funny that actually, isn't it funny, our internal impact spent so much money, talking about money, on branding, and our clients generally don't notice, I think. But I like you notice my outfit, my matching. So thank you. And I will take up Mohammed's comments because we'll build on them, because I think that's really good points about the aid and the one-off nature, not sustaining, and then it becomes sort of self-sustaining in terms of that step process. And also seems to me that the more options and flexibility we have, the greater sources. So I'm going to, with that warm welcome, you're familiar with this, so we'll just move on. And yes, and I love that actually this afternoon group is more likely to speak on the microphone. So Mohammed, Zara and Raid, I really appreciate when you talk because it's much more interactive, and so thank you. So the day, at 2 hours, looks like this. A little bit of a reconnect and refocus. And then Flavia is going to give an overview of social protection funding. So from the Sustainable Development Goals at the big level, and in terms of the International Labour Organization, the principles around universal access and coverage. And then she'll talk more deeply into what social protection flaws are and the difference between contributory and non-contributory systems. So that will be an overview. And then she'll go into country-specific case studies. Now, none of them are from the NENA region. We've got Brazil, Ecuador, Zambia, and Indonesia. And it's just about their government responses, about sort of liberating, funds in different ways. And so it's looking at them going, well, what's useful? What can we learn? What's similar? What's different for the NENA region? And then from that sort of domestic, we've got a professor, Barry Herman, talking about the international aspect of this, and particularly around financing in volatile periods and situations. And it is a video. We taped him in New York on Friday, and so it's going to be a professor's presentation to you, so that's a video. In between we'll have a break because that's important, and then we'll just finish off with a Q&A and basically hopefully a good discussion around so what are the lessons for you in the region. So that's our day. In terms of specific objectives, these are to determine the importance of improving the financial sustainability of social protection programs, especially in rural areas. And I think you're here because you know the importance. This difference between contributory and non-contributory social protection. And the domestic resource mobilization mechanism. So what is the range, when it's not just about aid? So taxes, natural resources, subsidies reform, that sort of thing. And then, of course, alongside this sort of knowledge around social protection funding is this skills-based and thinking-based. We want you to, this is part of the webinars, is help us to think differently, and the sort of systems thinking skills about seeing the linkages and similarities and differences, being able to see it at a systemic, strategic level, and also the nuances of what it means in your context, your country. And of course, continuing to know each other and build the community. So that's it. And Mohammed, you started it off, but you were tasked to speak. So Mohammed, you were speaking with Tamir, maybe, and Zara, did you have, and Raid and Nawal, did you have a chance to talk about that? So what are your experiences of financing social protection? What is your, and also, if you want to explore, what is really important for you to explore in this webinar, in this 2 hours? Over to you.
Me or Mohammed?
Oh, whoever wants to talk first. But Zara, yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, I contacted the Ra'id, and he corrected to me the name. He is not Riyad. His name is Ra'id, and this was important for me to know. And we start, step by step to understand better the differences and the common issues. And we consider it an initial step over.
Oh, I missed out that. You consider it a what?
An initial step to better understand the differences in both countries.
Ah, nice. Okay. And what was the differences that you just noticed
Actually,
so
we
far?
corresponded via email, so we didn't exchange a lot of information. But at least from the previous interventions, I know now that there is a lot of focus on the uh, migratory issue because livelihood is something.
Okay. Okay. Your background, there's a background noise. I wonder if Chiara can help you with that in the meantime. But that's great. Okay. And so, Mohammed, or yeah. Any other comments? What's particularly useful for the three of you in terms of today? What do you, given that you know what we're going to talk about in the objectives, anything you want to talk about?
I can't catch your ideas. Repeat, please. Pardon me. What do you mean?
What? Yes. Just given the agenda and given the objectives, what is important for you to know or explore today?
I want to know how to use the potential resources in my country to finance. For example, I think using the potential labor force for poor people is a source of financing, or tourism in my country can be a source of financing social protections in the field of for poor people. I want to know more about how to convert, how to change the unsustained or semi-sustained plans to a full sustained plan. Okay.
I think in terms of noticing what resources your country has, and and capitalising on them and being creative around that, and then of course I guess it's not a linear process from that semi-sustained to
My country
sustained. But Flavia, would you like to comment?
My country spends a lot of resources, a lot of money for poor people, but our experience shows that relying only on budget and resources that comes from selling oil is not sufficient, and it increases every year without any empowerment of the people, and their behavior of the people will change. I think social protection resources, financial money should convert to some sustainable resources that comes from the people, not the budget. Thanks.
Thank you. Flavia, would you like to comment?
Sarah,
yeah.
I would like very much to learn, is there any innovative solution how to secure maybe sustainable resources for the very well designed umbrella of social protection initiatives that we are now hosting and developing in Egypt? Penella?
Okay, yes. No, I'm sorry, just writing it down. Flavia, yes, Flavia, would you like to...
The purpose of this session, of course, is to discuss the several ways of funding social protection, but this is from a government point of view. This is, I believe, more from learning point of view, but at the same time, in the end, when the Professor Barry Herman is going to speak, he speaks about international commitment to it. In terms of new, like, innovative ways of funding, I can think about that I could relate some of the case studies here as innovative thinking, because just the fact that there are so many solutions to fund social protection, that's very innovative in these days. So I think it's a matter of the country willing to find resources. And I also understand that for us, in our further work for the UN and the government counterparts, it's interesting to think about ways of funding social protection through international communities. So if Barry doesn't answer your question, we can discuss later about that. I think you're very much probably on the top of it because you're working directly. You know the trends of grants and funds that now that they're making the UN agencies to work more and more, and they're coming from pools of funding that compromise different donors. So I see the trend these days, or let's say the innovative trend from the side of who is implementing it, is definitely to use funding that comes from different sources, and it's not just one donor anymore and not one agency. We need to work in cooperation more and more. That's how I see it, at least.
Thanks, Flavia. And actually, just in terms of system thinking skills, just even the fact that you have an intention of looking for innovative solutions, or Muhammad, you want in terms of taking things to sustainable, even that intention is really important, because that will direct your own actions and behaviours. It's really powerful. So we've just just a note from Chiara, really, just in terms of if there's any noise difficulties. Zara, you had a background noise. You had problems with noise too. So just connect with Chiara on private, just to call that. We've got the Twitter. Everyone's very quiet on Twitter around this, but do engage with each other in the wider community. And here's a little exercise just to warm up in terms of the content. So bingo is just in terms of the first one to answer all those, to feel that they can answer all that. Just yell out bingo. We'll just give it a couple of minutes in terms of your own. You can just make a note on your own or type it in chat. Zara, strategic development goals. Okay, go. The first one to bingo, they can be the afternoon webinar bingo champion if they can fill out all the acronyms. Bingo. So, strategic development goals. What does ILO stand for? International Labour Organization. What is a social protection floor? That might be a bit tricky. What % of global rural population lacks health coverage? What is that percentage, do you think? What are FTTs? There's lots of acronyms in funding or international work, isn't it? A system for mainstreaming services, great. What is UHC in the context of what we're saying? It probably stands for a lot of things, but what do you think it is? And what is GDP? We should all know that. That's a high school question, isn't it? So who thinks I've got 7 out of 7? GDP stands for gross domestic product. Yep. Production. Sorry, great. Any more? Muhammad? Ziad? Number 4, 50%, around 50% of global rural population lacks health coverage. Yes, very. Muhammad. FTT first and then. Yes. Financial transaction taxes in this sense. Okay, I'll do a round of applause. I'll use the applause button. So thank you all. It's a little introduction to actually what we are going to be talking about. And Flavia, in the next session, will go into overview of social protection funding, talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, and then in terms of the International Labour Organization, the ILO, principles around universal access and coverage, and what is a social protection floor, and also this contributing and non-contributing. Over.
Thank you. Would you be able to pass the slide for me? Thanks. Thank you. Oh, great. So I saw that you all know what social protection floors are, but still I think it's appropriate to go back a little bit in time and talk about the SDGs that you also know from the previous exercise, their Sustainable Development Goals. The social protection floors are a key priority for the SDGs, especially related. Thank you, Zara. Very nice to see you here as well. Especially related to SDGs 1.3, 3.8, and 8B that relate to directly social protection systems and no poverty, universal health coverage, which is the UHC that we saw in the previous exercise, and a global strategy for youth employment. But just to contextualize a little bit better, how do you see, if I may ask you, a universal access? Do you think that this is universal access to social protection? Sorry. Do you think this is a mandatory, or it could be perhaps discussed? How do you see it? Zara Mohammed.
Hi.
Yes.
Do you mean, are you talking about the necessity of universal access?
Yes.
So you are talking about opportunities.
No, I'm talking about your belief if the universal access to social protection is something that all countries should have.
Yes, I think
Flavia?
the basic needs should be met by any country, any government. Are you talking about the necessity of social protection?
Yes.
I can't.
Being universal to. My question is if you think that social protection being universal is something that we should all promote.
Yes, I see not universal, it's national. It has some national index in this. I think social protection should be regarded domestically, nationally, not internationally. But it is a universal right for every citizen. But it should be planned via national and domestic strategies and plans.
Flavia?
Yes, I'm listening.
If you mean by universal that all people, all human beings, either national or international, so I think this is something that we have to work hardly for. All needy people, either nationally or internationally, they deserve to receive services.
Yes, and this is exactly the same perspective what you both just said that Mohammed called national, which is correct, but it means universal just because it's a way to say that everyone has the right to have it. And this is the point of view of ILO, and we from FAO share the same point of view, that financial protection is important, affordability for health services is important, quality of health services is important, and availability. So it is essential for all the human beings have social health protection, social protection, quality health care, availability of this health care, and a financial protection as well. The universal coverage from ILO point of view has also an importance on policy coherence, of course, because when you're talking about social protection, you're involving a lot of different policymakers, a lot of different institutions. You are promoting a consensus building on various levels of the government. You're involving the partners. So this is a very important base for the social protection floor, because like the SDGs, there are a compromise that goes beyond the government, that reaches the civil society and other stakeholders. So this is the same from the view that we have from universal coverage of social protection. And it's important to understand that, because from this, then you can justify financing and funding it. Now, as yes?
Sorry, Flavia. Yeah, just want to make sure, does that make sense, Mohammed and Zara?
Yes, makes sense. Yes, of course.
Yeah, great.
Nothing to say. Everything is trivial. Very good. I have nothing to say.
Yeah, great. Yeah, continue, Flavia.
Thank you. I think I had a bit of a delay. As you properly guessed in the previous exercise, the universal coverage for the rural areas, it is indeed around 50%. ILO estimated on 56% of the rural population lacking health coverage compared to 22% of the global urban population. This is not difficult to explain, because what does it mean that you have health coverage? From one side is the right to have health coverage, as the previous slide I just spoke about it. There's a political consensus. But at the same time, you need health facilities. It's not easy for populations in the rural areas to access clinics or doctors. So that also has an impact. In that sense, the cost of expanding social health coverage is much more in terms of providing the services to people, and there is a huge infrastructure and logistic behind it, than only providing the right for them to have social health coverage. Is it clear? Taking as a yes. Yes, tell me.
But you are talking only about health coverage. Social protection is a very vast area of study and implementing. But you are speaking only about health coverage, okay? You should keep in mind that your discussion here is a limited discussion. Only health coverage. Thanks.
It's not going to be only health coverage. This example is on health coverage, but as you can see here, and as you correctly pointed, it's much broader than just health. That's why it leads me to the social protection floors that cover a basic package of interventions that are not only their access to health, their basic income security for children, basic income security for people that are in active age or working age, and also for the elderly. So it's a life cycle approach of interventions that is basic to protect your population. And you're right, health is just one pillar, like you can see here, number one. But it also includes guaranteeing nutrition education for children, guaranteeing that people in working age can earn sufficient income to survive, and also pensions and other security schemes for the elderly and retired. And all that should include the rural population as well, as you can see in the red parts of this this slide. Do you think it's clear about the social protection floors?
It's holistic, include many, let's say, important and essential elements. And I discovered now from your explanation, from your slide, that even access to nutrition education is included in the social protection floor, and this is very, very important and very, let's say, very complementary to many activity and intervention, overlooking sometimes the nutrition education aspects.
Yes, this is true because it's a life cycle approach, right? So it includes everything, the basic needs that any human being in any age would probably have. So the social protection floors are this package, this basic package. And ILO, together with other partners, discussing the countries. I think, Zara, you experienced that in Egypt, for example. Some of the discussion is of the social protection floor. That
Yes.
is just discussing with the government how they can provide this basic package to the
Exactly.
population.
Yes, exactly.
I think there is something.
Yes?
Can you come back to the last thing? I think in your life cycle something is lacking. The usual people who work. The first category, in your categories, you have 4 categories: children and mothers. First, mothers and children, then disabled and people who can work, and older, old age people. But you don't have any category for usual people, for fathers of the household that can't earn enough. Where do you locate them in your life cycle?
It is on number 3 because it's understood that those people in active age, of working age,
No, they are unable to earn sufficient income, in particular in case of sickness, unemployment, maternity. They work. They are not unemployed, but they can't earn enough. The majority of people who need social protection are usual people, not sick, not mothers, not children. Usual people that should categorize in the biggest category. I think
no, this is just in particular. It's just in particular these cases, but it includes whoever else is working.
Okay.
Yes, it does include. It's just that in particular is like saying including as well the people that cannot work but are working age, but the people that can work but don't earn enough, that they're also included. It's part of the idea that links to SDG 8, which is decent employment, that human beings have the right to have decent employment with a sufficient salary. That is directly linked to it. And as you can see, developing countries are increasing social protection in the past years. You have this graph since 2000. You see how many of the developing countries, not the developed ones, are increasing. You have on the far right countries like Egypt, they are not too far away from Brazil. As you can see, Brazil number 2, and also Turkey, Jordan, Algeria. Yeah. And it's important also to mention in this case that not only the expenditure in public social protection increased, but as well the inequality has been increasing as you probably heard from other sources. So it's a problem that still needs to be more tackled, if I can say that, or it has to be even more prioritized because of how much inequality the world still has. In terms of approaches to social protection floor, what that slide just wants to show is among the countries in the world that are part of the ILO or are part of the UN, how many of them have contributory schemes only and non-contributory schemes? So what is the difference between one and the other? You know this already, I'm sure, but just to take it back, contributory schemes are programs that people have to contribute a percentage, like pensions. So you pay pension throughout your life, and then in the end, when you retire, you get you get the pension back for the years that you're still alive. So those are programs that you pay to contribute. Is the same in many cases of universal healthcare, that people also could pay for it. In other cases, the state pays for it, is subsidized, but it's a program that the population pays or the worker pays for part of it. It's understood that contributory schemes are programs that are related to the working age people that could and have part of their salary to pay for it. Non-contributory schemes are programs that do not have any funding coming from the individual and are just a transfer, like a cash transfer. It's basically an income distribution. So the individual doesn't have to pay anything throughout his or her life to receive this benefit. Her just need to be eligible for it.
Muhammad, you had your hand up.
Yeah.
By contributory, you mean some investment, some engagement of the poor people in financing, okay?
Not only poor people, anyone, for example, pensions or social security.
Oh, I don't understand the concept of contributory here. Contributory is a term used in insurance. For example, you invest some money in insurance or banks, insurance companies or banks, and they pay back your money in the future. Here, by contributory, do you mean the schemes that some poor people are engaged in financing? Surely any social protection plan needs money, needs financial plans, and all are contributory. But when you use contributory for these plans, I thought you mean the engagement of poor people.
Not necessarily. Like, don't only think the poor people per se, but those are programs that it requires some payment beforehand. So this is it's basically a pension, or you can call it insurance. It's fine. But what I mean with the contributory is that it's a program that, for example, the majority of people in most countries that use contributory pensions are public workers, because when they're working, they are paying some money to the pension, to the social security. Then when they retire, they get this money back. So it's a percentage of what they're paying already. That's what I mean by contributory. It's a social security fund that collects money from people in general. Poor people usually cannot pay this contribution. That's why there are some exceptions in countries that give pensions even to the people that cannot afford it, but then that comes from the government funding. So there are ways to cover the poor people, but in general, pensions, for example, and Social Security are contributory because the individual receiving it has to pay some amount throughout his or her life to be retired after. And this is different from a cash transfer. Tell me.
So when you use the word, the phrase contributory, you mean that the person who receives the uh, the aid should have some engagement, some payments beforehand. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yes. And you can see from here that contributory schemes only are the majority of what countries do in social protection. You see in your far left, 77 countries have it, as opposed to non-contributory universal schemes. They're a little bit less common. But talking about your country, now that we discussed the meaning of contributory and non-contributory, how is it in your country?
Yeah, we've got a poll as well in Zara. You've got some, yeah.
We have in Egypt the mixed approach, contributory and non-contributory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the same in Brazil.
So here's just a quick poll just between the two of you, or you want to put that? But also, what are the implications of such a majority being contributory, Flavia?
Sorry, what is the implications of?
Yeah, what are the implications? When you've got 77% require,
Well, this is the reflection of what I said, that most countries have contributory programs or social security, social pensions for their public workers. This is the case for a handful of countries. It's very common. So the only people that can access social protection are the ones that work for the government, so for public employees, because they have stable jobs. And there are some legislative difficulties in having a huge informal economy and social pensions, because it's kind of unclear. The people don't want to contribute. They were working for the informal economy, so they don't have the rights, but they also don't get the benefits. And that's why the implication of having only a contributory scheme is that you risk not actually including the people who need more this pension.
I have a question. Where are you from, Flavia?
Me? Brazil.
Where is it? Thanks.
And what is behind that question?
Yes, I'm curious as well.
Go on. Well, yeah. What difference does it make, or what implications, or yeah? What were you thinking? We're interested in how you think as well. In terms of understanding what happened in Brazil? Yeah, tell.
I think we answered the question via the poll.
He wanted to know why I put what I put in the poll.
Okay.
All countries, all of us voted that we have mixed approaches.
Yes. So you were curious about where I'm from. I thought you just covered me by my accent, but maybe no.
The Spanish accent.
Okay. Yes, lovely. So yeah, any wider thoughts on the overview of social protection funding, from the Sustainable Development Goals to the ILO, universal access and coverage, social protection floors, these different systems. What does it trigger Any questions that triggers for you or thoughts? Okay, well, we'll move to, I guess, Flavia, now you're going to go a deep dive into 4 different case studies of the, that are outside the NENA region, but thinking, okay, what are the lessons learned and what are the challenges for these and what does it mean for our context? So, over to you.
So as Penelope explained at the beginning, we're going to have 4 very, very quick case studies. I might even call them like short stories because my goal here is to present to you just 4 of the various methods that countries have been using these days to fund social protection. This is definitely not limited to what you see here. There are many other ways, but those were 4 interesting cases that I found and I decided to share. So let's start with, now you know, Mohammed, my own country, Brazil, that Brazil started to introduce something that is called financial transaction taxes. That it was started in 1993, and basically what are financial transaction taxes? Are taxes on every single financial transaction. So if you pay something with your debit card, a small amount of this is a tax. If you are transferring money to someone else, a small part of it is a tax. If you're applying money in some sort of investment bound, then you're also having to pay a tax over it. And with this financial transaction taxes, Brazil managed to have a revenue of 1.4 of its own GDP by 2007. And that was enough to cover the social protection floor, total cost of programs like Bolsa Familia and other non-contributory programs. So one of the biggest ways that Brazil used to finance their own social protection program, which is very, very huge, very, very big and well known, was through financial transaction taxes. There are 2 implications of it. Of course, when you apply taxes to all transactions, it has an influence in the market because that's going to change how people are going to apply their money or how they're going to transfer their money. So it does influence markets. I don't know to which extent that was positive or negative in Brazil. We will need to find studies that show that. And also in terms of the remittances, because a large part of the Brazilian, not a large part, but a significant part of the Brazilian economy sends remittances, like the Brazilians abroad send remittances back to Brazil. So if they have to be taxed on it, they will probably think twice and find alternative ways to get this money to their family. So this is definitely a challenge and it's also something that sometimes the government cannot tax. So that's part of the challenge of this approach. And then just carrying on to complement the Brazilian case, I decided to put here the adoption of the 1988 Constitution in Brazil that includes Social Security as a universal and citizenship right. This is very important for all we're talking here today because, and of course, like Brazil, many other countries did the same. This is not exclusive to Brazil, but it's an example and very important to note how including social protection rights in your constitution would make sure that a country can find a ways to finance it. So I think without establishing legal entities and making these rights enforceable, it's harder for a country to figure it out solutions for it. Especially in the case of social security systems they have to be grounded in law to make it sustainable over time. And this is directly, of course, contributing to the sustainability of the programs because now that they are part of the law, parties, different governments cannot change it very much. They have to adapt to it.
Mohammed, you had your hand up.
I want to make something clear about sustainability. Do you regard devoting taxes to social protection a sustainable resource?
Sorry, I don't. Can you rephrase it?
For I think they have misunderstanding about sustainable. I think that allocating some portion of tax to social protection is not a sustainable resource. Do you regard it as a sustainable resource when you set a law that, for example, importing some cigarettes or exporting something else, you set a percentage of the percentage of it for social protection? Do you regard this kind of budgeting and financing as sustainable?
Yes, this is what I mean by sustainable, because when it's part of the law, it means that it cannot be easily changed. So you always have to find a way to have implement this program.
I changed my concept. Okay. I have another concept, but in your discussion, I accept your definition of sustainability.
Thanks. Zara, do you have any points to add?
I've got something. Just I think so. The difference. It's interesting about Mohammed. I agree about that sort of one-off sustainability. That scenario of taxing on cigarettes, or whatever, has a lifetime, hasn't it? And I think sustainability is always. It's not going to be ever one thing. Sustainability is also about being able to adapt and adjust for the long term. But it's interesting how Flavia said, yeah, it's sustainable here in the sense that it will take, there's a protection in terms of the law is protecting, so it's more consistent. So it's interesting the difference between that.
Okay, let's carry on to the next case, which is Ecuador. Ecuador is kind of a complex and very remarkable because it was a huge news when it happened. Basically, in 2008, the president of Ecuador, the president at the time, Rafael Correa, he decided to default on part of the public debt that Ecuador had. Why did he do that? First, Ecuador could not manage to have a full debt restructuring with the international financing institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, because it was not a very poor country already. It was highly in debt, but not super poor, so it was complicated for them to restructure the debt. So what they did, they commissioned a national, let's say, a national group of experts, a working group, and to have a look on the public debt that Ecuador had. And this commission stated that part of this debt was illegitimate. So what the president of Ecuador did, he said part of this debt is illegitimate. It should not have been accounted against us as a debt, so we're just not going to pay it. And with the money that he didn't pay, he applied expanding healthcare, education, and social protection programs. So you can see like social spending doubled, like from more than like 40.8% to 10.3% in 2011 of the GDP. And you can see in this slide how much the spending on social spending in Ecuador increased from 2004 to 2011. And at the same time, the poverty rate and Gini coefficient, also the poverty rate, they decreased. It's important to say that in this case of Ecuador, that not necessarily was that negative for the country, because they're coming from a financial crisis, and by spending social protection, you're also promoting that people become consumers, because if they have less things to take, if they have a little bit more money in the end of the month, they would consume more. So with this process, he helped to boost their economy and to get out of the financial crisis faster. Of course, I'm not personally promoting this type of approach. It's very dangerous to default a debt as a country, because you're sending a signal to the whole world and to the economic markets that you're not a good investor because you don't pay your debt. So this was a risk that Ecuador took, and in the case here, they were successful for various reasons. They're very particular. What I'm trying to say here is that there is a chance of financing social protection through debt restructuring. The case of Ecuador was a default, okay, but in other countries, they could renegotiate their debt to free up some space, some money, that they could then reinvest in social spending. Do you think, well, where is Zara? I don't see her anymore. Mohammed, I'm only with you and Marussia.
Mohammed, have you got...
She'll probably be back soon.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's not a good approach. I think it's not a good approach to...
I agree with you.
Yes.
I agree with you. This is what I'm saying. This is not trying to promote some defaulting, but it is trying to illustrate debt restructuring. That's something that it's probably very useful, debt restructuring for many countries, not default. The Ecuador was one case that it was ended up being more positive than negative, but that was very particular. That's why I said it was a well-known case at the time, because the country simply decided not to pay it back their debt.
Yeah, I mean, Mohammed, do you disagree for the same reasons with Flavia in terms of sending a signal to the market?
I think this approach is a sort of populism for some government to survive. They make happy people by giving up debts, and they distract the credit of the country, and it has a very destructive long-term effect.
Yes, I completely agree with you.
Zara, in terms of what you missed, do you want to, Flavia to go through anything with you? Of course, we're recording this, so you can always tap into the recording, but is there anything that you want actually see when you dropped out? Is it possible? Is it possible to repeat? If it is recorded, go ahead. Is there anything you want to... Where did you leave us? In Brazil or Ecuador? Where were we?
I left you in Brazil.
Brazil. So, Flavia, just a quick, in terms of Ecuador's courageous, I think they were probably quite courageous and very risk-taking response. So do you want to quickly just summarize, and then, of course, Zara can catch up?
Yes. Zara, the importance of the Ecuador is because they managed to finance social protection and spend the social protection coverage through debt restructuring. So the country was highly in debt, and they decided that part of their debt was illegitimate themselves, and they simply didn't pay back. So instead of negotiating their debt and freeing up some money for social spending, they decided not to pay part of it. It was successful in the case of Ecuador because they managed to support a faster economy recover, as with more social spending, more people are consumers, and that I think it fastened the process of economy recover. But at the same time, as I was discussing with Mohammed, this is very risky because when you simply don't pay back your debt, you're sending a signal to the world that you're not a good creditor. You're not a good, you're not going to pay back your loans. So investing in your country is negative. So that is not a good approach, but it illustrates very well the opportunity that countries have to negotiate their debt. You have your hand raised, you can say.
Yes, please. I wonder, is it sort of debt swap?
That is also another modality. This is not what it is here, but it does exist cases of debt swaps, exactly. You're right, in which countries they make agreements with whoever they have to pay back to simply change debt rules or change how the debt is going to be paid, or basically do a swap inside their own economy so they could free some resources. That is possible, and that happens.
Great. And in the case of Ecuador, do you have any information about the negotiation mode they adopted in order to convince the donors or the organization that they will stop paying back their credit on their debt?
No, what they did in this case was they didn't really negotiate. They hired a commission, a national commission, to do a study, to go through all their public debt and see the origin of it. And this commission stated that part of it was illegitimate. So let's say part of this debt was only caused because the IMF badly oriented Ecuador. So they said, we would not have this debt if it wasn't for what the IMF told us to do. And by stating that, they possibly decided that about 2 billion of bonds in debt were not going to be paid back. So they didn't really negotiate, but they basically said, this is illegitimate, I'm not going to pay back. Why? In the case of Ecuador, their reputation did not suffer. It was only because what they did instead was, okay, they did not pay this bond, so they said 2.3 billion in debt, I'm not going to pay back. So this money got really devaluated because, after all, you know, the debt is not only a matter of a loan that a country gives to the other. Those are bonds that are related to the market, and they could go up and down. So because Ecuador defaulted, those loans, they became very, very low. So then after 6 months, they started to buy it again for 1/5 of the price. So Ecuador themselves bought their debt after. That was kind of a very complicated to explain. That's why I tried to not approach this part of the story, but that was the only reason why they didn't have a very bad credit reputation in the end, because they did that. But as it's extremely risky and definitely not advisable.
Well, but one tiny small question more, please. Did they, are you telling us the debt or the interest of the debt?
No, it was the debt itself.
Debt itself. Very interesting.
Yeah, they didn't pay back. They had some deadlines of bonds that they are supposed to pay back.
And do you know the volume of this debt that was illegitimated?
They said that it was 2.3 billion. I don't know how much was the overall debt of Ecuador.
$2.3 billion.
Yes. Yeah, so they didn't pay back 2 billion, basically 2 billion. That they used this money to expand social security, social protection, sorry.
Interesting. Okay.
This is part of the literature, so if you want to read more, the whole case of Ecuador can be found on our website of the course, and then you can see all, like, Brazil, Ecuador, and the other cases, and many more. There are other interesting cases. The case of Mongolia is very interesting. Because they started to tax gas. They have a lot of natural gas in Mongolia, and they started to tax it. But then what happened is the price of the gas got really low, so it was not just that. So they had a problem with it. The case of Bolivia is something similar to it. They nationalized the gas industry.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a bunch of examples that you can see.
I will.
Yeah, more info on this.
Very interesting. I will.
Then very quickly on Indonesia, because it's something that I think you all have some, let's say, some idea what that about, because Indonesia finances social protection to removal of fuel subsidies. So as the government gradually withdrew from fuel subsidies, they also extended social services, especially on healthcare. So it's not only like also education assistance and conditional cash transfer, but especially on healthcare. So then how they did that, it was basically what Egypt is doing, that it's gradually removing its subsidies and then using this money to invest in other areas that could be more efficient for social development. The same as Brazil, Indonesia only managed to do this because it recognizes social protection as a constitutional right to its citizens. So in that case, it was very important for them to justify swapping between fuel subsidies and social services. And but because the government extended healthcare coverage to informal sector, that included a lot of rural areas. And as you know, Indonesia, it's a how do I say in English, a group of islands? There's a word, archipelago or something like that. Yeah. Well, Indonesia has a lot of islands, so logistically and geographically, it's very complicated to build health facilities that could be accessible to all the rural population and the people that live in those difficult places. So one of the challenges they have been having then is less on the financing part, but more on administrative budgetary for that. It is hard to extend coverage when you have so many geographically challenged. But you can see here that at some point, the subsidies of fuel, like in 2005, they were 26% of the GDP in Indonesia. And by 2011, they were 11. At the same time that cash transfers were increasing. Is that clear? Do you find similarities between Indonesia and your countries? Because I think this one was the most similar one of the cases.
At least in Egypt, yes, there is similarity between the case of Indonesia in terms of revisiting the subsidy of fuel gradually and reallocating the margin saved to better coverage or maybe increase the subsidy for the needy people.
Correct.
And Mohammed, you've had your hand up as well.
What in the last slide, what did you mean of informal sector?
I mean the people that are not registered, so they don't pay taxes.
Not registered? What do you mean about registered? They are citizens or not? They are citizens.
They're registered citizens, but they're not formally working. They don't have holidays. They're not registered for the government, so the government doesn't receive their taxes.
So you mean they work in informal labor stores, okay?
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And then the last one, it's the case of Zambia. And as I said, you have Mongolia or Bolivia or even Brazil that also taxed their natural resources as a way to finance social protection. In the case of Zambia, that is a natural resource rich country. I can show to you here. You can see here the fiscal revenues from the mining sector in Zambia, they multiplied from the 90s to 2012. And by taxing this sector, Zambia managed to get 32.9% of their GDP by 2013, and that was reapplied to health education and social protection. This is also the case of Brazil, and also cases very famous one, for example, Norway, that has a huge or very significant oil industry, and so little citizens. They have like 5-6 million Norwegians, and that allowed the government to use the revenues from the oil industry to redistribute to their citizens. So there is even this joke going around the world that every Norwegian citizen has at least $1 million, because if you actually divide how much the oil industry makes by the number of Norwegians, every Norwegian would have $1 million. This, of course, is very extreme, and just going back to reality, is a way of financing social protection through taxation of their natural resources. Like Brazil is doing that with the oil industry. A couple of years ago, a new reserve or reservoir, I don't know, of oil was found, and the government decided that all the revenues from that particular reservoir were going to be used directly to education. So those are ways. I understand that this is not possible in all the countries. Some countries are not rich in natural resources, but all those case studies were only a couple of solutions, not even close to all of them, that I just wanted to illustrate to you in a very, like, let's say, holistic way, how many ways you can fund social protection if your government has the will to do so. And then how does that apply? How do you think it could be applicable to your context? Do you find that those case studies are relevant, or have you heard about any other initiative from your government that would finance social protection?
In case of Egypt, the example that I followed with you are, I think, to some extent learnable. We can learn from them, and at least we are sharing part of the experiment, the case of Indonesia, in terms of reform policies for the oil subsidy. And what I am really thinking, seriously now, this case of Brazil, the financial transaction taxes. I don't know to what extent it can be doable for Egypt, but at least we have to think it over again. Some expert can help in this case by calculating this even primarily, and telling us if it worth trying or not.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, I would maybe have big restriction on the remittances, because they are already channeling a lot of these remittances via informal channels, and we don't want to add more threat to those Egyptian in the diaspora. But we can maybe think it over about this national financial transaction taxes. We are flooding now in a lot of a big amount of money in the bank, as they told us repeatedly. And if this is the case, why don't we think it over and to have this share bumped directly to the sake of the needy people, farmers, or maybe in the health sector. I like very much this case in Brazil, where you directed all the revenue from the new discovery of this gas, maybe gas or oil, I don't remember, to serve directly to education. If we can do something like this, it will be, you can measure the impact directly. Investing in education, investing in, I am a bit biased to farmers, can give an indication, a direct impact. So overflow.
Yes. I don't know, Mohammed, do you want to intervene as well?
I don't know how to regard these examples as trying to sustain financing. I think these are not sustained financing. They are only changing policies. For example, when you change fuel subsidies to some social protection policies such as health insurance or other, etc., these are not sustaining them. They are only changing strategies and policies. What I mean, I think we should first clear the notion of sustain. In my private opinion, maybe we have different points of view. In my opinion, when you talk about sustainable financing, you are I am talking about some plans to make financing stand on its foot. For example, when you relate some finances to some revenues that comes from the pocket of people, the poor people. For example, when you give them some jobs that are public works, these are examples of sustained financing plans. But your examples about these countries were only about changing strategies in social protection, not making financing a sustained financing. Thanks.
Penelope, what's your opinion?
I think it's it is a big point, isn't it? Because I think, I mean, if I think about extractive industries in a wider sense, if I took a systemic view, any taxing or on extractive industries is not a long-term sustainable approach. It is not sustainable. We know that in terms of the pollution in the world and blah, blah, blah. So I think, and so in a wider point, so if the whole financial, our global financial system, I think needs to be restructured to be really, truly sustainable. So I think that's a bigger point, that's a stronger point. I think on the route here, I think these examples have shown where a country is making the most or is trying to think strategically about its resources and how it can convert the existing system and make it benefit for social protection. That's how I see it. I sort of like, this is, so how can we make the most of it where we're Ecuador saying, actually, no, I'm not going to pay my debts for the international market in order to do something else. And that's quite a courageous decision. Whether it's sustainable and whether market will follow it, that's another thing. I think, I mean, Zambia, its mining industry, once again, that's an extractive situation, and it's not a long-term thing. So it's a big conversation. But I think, you're right, Mohammed, around what is truly sustainable. But in terms of working towards that, I think where you can creatively think about different ways to fund social protection is the best response we can make at the moment. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever. What do you think?
I think it makes sense to me.
Shall we move? Shall we just sort of do a pause? Yeah. Literally, actually, some of the feedback is like the intensity of the webinar. So let's reconvene in 5 minutes. So that's a bit of a pause to stretch. And actually, if you want to grab a coffee or a water or what have you. We're going to come back and then we're going to introduce the speaker, Barry Herman, and we're going to launch a video. And the video itself is 24 minutes long. So you are going to be in your own little one-to-one with a presentation with a professor for 24 minutes. So see you back here at 15, that's 15:25 or 26, let's say, CET. So that's 5 minutes, just a bit of a stretch, and we'll see you back soon. Okay, welcome back. Have you stretched? So the next part, well, I want to say actually, I'll go to this part here, is this context-specific situations. So I'm going to hand over to Flavia to give an introduction of why she chose Barry to talk about this. And over to you, Flavia. Thank you.
So Barry Herman is a former UN director. He worked for Financing for Development Office of the UNDESA for over 20 years, and he led several divisions in this office. And currently, he's not only an economics professor at the New School of Social Research in New York, but he's also one of the co-partners, if I can say that, for the Social Justice and Global Development. It's an NGO that is currently looking at financing social protection floors through volatile periods. And he recently wrote a paper with ILO actually on the same topic. So I thought that he would be one of the most able people to talk about innovative ways to financing social protection floors through volatile periods, and also international commitment to finance it.
Great. So we'll just, Kiara will launch the YouTube, and it may upload in different speeds. But once you're finished, just raise your hand. See you in about 24 minutes. Thank you. Great. And Zara, were you able to finish? Just got, I think, different speeds. Okay. So, yeah, I guess really that what is, having heard Barry's talk, what are your key points, or what will you take away? Maybe some more ideas, Zara, about innovative solutions. Mohammed, maybe a more clearer idea of that sustainability factor. And just in terms of the expanding the possibilities of funding. What are your thoughts? Yes, Mohammed, go ahead.
About international actions, I can think about international actions as sustainable actions. Even domestic actions in some sustainable countries are unsustainable. How can we regard international actions sustained in this, as he said, the volatile world? For example, in my country, the sanctions on my country is an example. For example, we can't afford some social protection. We can't finance some old social protection plans because of sanctions. So sustainability can't be defined for international action. And another point, I think we should have some documents or text about this interview. If you have it, please send it to us. It had some important categorization. The speaker had, and I think he was confirming my opinion about the difference between financing by tax and financing by some other tools. I want to have some text or documents about his ideas. Thanks.
Great. I know, Zara, you haven't finished your the video yet.
No problem, but I would love very much to share with you some thoughts. Can I?
Yes, please do.
First, let me admit this topic is for me very sophisticated. I'm not specified in economy. And I do not understand what is the meaning of volatile periods. However, what I grasped from the discussion and from part of the video, that in a country like Egypt, under these pressing circumstances, I think we might need a hybrid of or a hybrid system or mixed approach, where we have to find an innovative way of raising fund or mobilizing more resources nationally, and also modify the way of collaborating internationally. I have the impression that sometimes we do agreement or sort of letter of agreement with some donors or organization where we do not figure out exactly our need. We can maybe study more what is needed and revisit the priority list before initiating any sort of international collaboration. I know that for sure other people are taking this into consideration, but I am talking from my very simple point of view. And I will try to read more in this topic, but can you just answer this tiny question? What is the volatile period? What do you mean by this?
It could be periods when you have a financial crisis, or let's say when you have a hurricane, or in the Middle East, for example, the humanitarian crisis that you can see in Syria or you can see in Iraq. So it's just basically a period of time that you need a higher amount of money going towards social protection for emergency, for many reasons.
Yeah. Flavia, you are now aware about the situation in Egypt. Can we describe it with a volatile period for Egypt? Are we now in a volatile period?
Yes and no. I think not from an emergency point of view, but the situation of the economy could probably lead to a quick disbursement loan. So what he meant, I think the international actions are very interesting here, because what he was trying to explain is that there is an intention, and probably it's going to happen, the creation of an international fund that would keep some money, and countries that have problems, either by get hit by an economic crisis, natural causes, or humanitarian crisis, could get a quick disbursement loans, because this country needs money very fast. And another way that he mentioned was a reduce or delay in debt, which is not what Ecuador did, but basically you're reducing or you're delaying your debt payment, so that would give you money for quick actions. Of course, this is a solution, but as Mohammed was saying very correctly, in my opinion, it's not sustainable, because this is for an emergency or something very punctual. There is still to have some more discussions about the domestic ways of financing social protection that not necessarily rely on an international community. He mentioned a few, like commodity funds, state contingent sovereign debt, which is a risk sharing, but you're right, this is very sophisticated. But I think the case studies that I gave could possibly bring some of the solutions.
Of course, yes, of course.
And to your point, well, both of you, the resources are on the socialprotection.org. And Mohammed, I've just put the links in there, socialdevelopmentjustice.org, Barry refers to, and also his, actually just contact him directly. He wants to hear. So absolutely. And I guess, Zara, I was just thinking that hybrid mix seems to be the way forward, isn't it? It's sort of, we always come back to that, but that is the thing. It's just like this not one solution, is it? And contextual, specific, country specific.
I also like that a lot.
Yeah. And I just in terms of volatility, it's interesting because we work with leaders around VUCA. VUCA is an acronym, VUCA, and it comes from the military in terms of volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situations, which was described war-like. But now actually people are saying, actually, that describes our country, that describes our organization, that describes our normal life. So this unpredictability, we don't know. But yes, economics has particular terms. So, but both of you...
VUCA. I like it, VUCA.
VUCA is death. VUCA is life. Come on. Vibrant, you know. So, Flavia, if you just want to emphasize this, the different types, and I'm aware it's now 4 o'clock, but I guess we have just 5 minutes more, yes?
Yes, go ahead, yes.
You, Flavia.
Yes, thinking about how to approach this. Well, I think there are a couple of insurances here that we've been mentioning throughout the whole presentation. Tax-based health protection, that is of course a tax that would directly go to the health care, or social health insurance that are contributions, but that's wage related, and the other one is a tax. So wage related means that the more you earn, the more you contribute. Taxes could be a little bit different. Microinsurance and community-based schemes. This is another solution that you have been seeing in the world, that microinsurance is something that is being broadcasted everywhere, or community-based schemes. We don't have any Lebanese colleague right now, but there's a very interesting case of Lebanon that used a community-based insurance for farmers to provide health insurance for them. And of course you have the private health insurance. That's what some people, like I have private health insurance. It's not the ideal because we would like things to be universal and accessible for everybody, but it's what is another modality of insurance. I think I would open for questions. If you don't have any, I would pass to Penelope to do the next steps.
I don't have a big question, but I want to give my congratulations to this group, because Zara and Mohammed are both so participative, and it's amazing to listen to them and their discussions and everything. So we are really happy here to listening to you.
I agree.
That's fun. You're fun. Really. So yes, the big questions. I guess that's right at the start we talked about that. There aren't clear answers. These are complex, interrelated issues, and we're not going to crack it with one answer. So I think it's really interesting what is the question we have to ask ourselves? Like the poet said, live with the question. So what are your big questions? I guess you don't have to even think of them now, but just it's interesting, I think. Mohammed.
First, let me define sustainability that is comprehensive. I define sustainability as a spectrum from full aid schemes to full empowering schemes. My big question is that what are the tools, what are the strategies, what are the policies that can move plans and schemes to more sustainable plans? Thanks.
Yeah. Can you type that to Mohammed while you're there? Just while I'm, just so we can capture that. And Zara, what's yours? I mean, just top of mind.
I do have one question. I think it's a simple one, not very big question. I wonder why the effectiveness of many of our interventions in Egypt and maybe in other countries, why the impact are not so very measurable? Do we need to come closer to people and to learn from them first, then go back to our desk and do our homework and learn, then meet the people again? Maybe in this way we can find a sort of at least partially solution to their pain. Also, we have a lot of collaboration with different agencies, and I am telling this to myself. what is the impact? So it's a simple question.
It's a great question. You know, really? What difference?
I think يعني, I believe I need on a personal basis in my domain, in my simple project, I need to learn more from people. How can I serve them better? Maybe when we sit in fancy offices and speak about theories like volatility and this theory of economy, which is good and based on a scientific foundation, but people might have simple shortcuts. Maybe.
Great. I'm going. Yeah, wonderful. I'm just going to. I wrote those questions down on the. All right, I'm going to put that. Okay. Flavia, just any comments from you?
No, I think this was a very good closure. I would prefer leaving like this.
Okay, right. So, between now and then, I'm just going to put this some of these comments here, sorry. Yeah. Between now and then. So we have the last, can you believe it, the last webinar. It's in a few weeks, so we'll get a little bit of a gap. 13th of September, we're going to put you together. So the afternoon session, if you could, we're going to ask you to join the morning session or just have one session. And it's going to be about the possibility of social protection and resilience building. And we'll, of course, send you the e-journal. We've got the resources on socialprotection.org, Barry's videos there, the full slides, the various case studies that we presented and more. And there's also this reflection, time to reflect. What have I learned? What does this mean? What impact are we having? You know, what is sustainability? And then for webinar 5, we will give you a task. Hold the space. In terms of feedback, of course, we would like you, the two of you, to give our feedback, please. And that would be very much appreciated. Kiara will put the link in there. And there we go. Yep. And I'm going to post the comment. Zara, how can I serve people better? I love that. So without further ado, yeah, thank you very much both for your interaction. And yeah, look forward to seeing you on the 13th of September. A big thank you from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right, thanks, Marisha. Thanks, Mohammed.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Zara. Hi, Zara.